Raising Teens by Collett Smart with Ray Kington.
Do you ever feel weird?
As if.
Hello, it's Ray Kington, joined by psychologist and teacher Collett Smart, raising teens, because when it comes to raising teens, well, sometimes there's a whole lot to learn or maybe relearn potentially, and this is a podcast where we talk about that. We certainly welcome your input. We'd love to hear from you via the Hope Media app. If you've got a question, shoot it to us and we'll try and tackle it on a future show. Collett, great to have you along on the podcast.
Oh, it's good to be back.
We're talking about puberty and what to expect. As far as puberty, me remembering it, I remember suddenly going from being 12 and dumpy to sickly thin and a lot of pimples.
Yes.
And a lot of uncomfortability. That's what I remember.
Oh, man, those years, I found my teenage years really difficult. I was self-conscious, body conscious, everything conscious. I think it's a very overwhelming time for you as a young person.
Yeah.
I mean, some young people it almost happens suddenly, and then others it creeps up. Some, you feel like you're sailing through it with your kids, and then it all hits in year 11. And for some parents, it hits right in year 7. So it's very different for each child. Whenever I do talks on puberty with young people, with year 6s usually, I talk to them about this huge continuum of normal. I mean, I don't use those words with them, but there's such a broad spectrum of normal. And I mean, we know the obvious body changes that happen, and you've already mentioned that will happen with our kids, but the brain science is becoming much more known these days. And it's been really a wonderful thing to learn, even for me, looking back at my own teenage years. But we know that adults think with their prefrontal cortex. So the prefrontal cortex is that part of your brain that's rational. It responds to situations with good judgment. Well, theoretically, because we all know adults, and, even I haven't always responded with good judgment, but anyway. But you're aware of long-term consequences. You also have life experience. Teenagers tend to process their information with the amygdala, and that is the emotional part of the brain. Something I spoke about in my book is the way the amygdala often sees anger in facial expressions for teenagers when there is none. So they're often misinterpreting facial expressions, body language. So their brains, this connection between the emotional part of the brain and the decision-making part of the brain is still very much developing, and it's not happening at the same rate. And that's why they have this overwhelming emotional input, or they're interpreting input in an overwhelming way. They can't explain often what they were even thinking when they did something. When you say to a child, what were you thinking? Sometimes they weren't.
Yeah.
And legitimately they weren't, because there was so much feeling happening at that time. And my friend, Dr. Michael Carr-Gregg, often says to parents, be your child's frontal lobe for a while. So, yeah, it's a hard time for the kids, but also for us to navigate as parents.
Yeah. One of the mistakes I think we probably all make as parents is because suddenly, they're the same height as us, they're able to do so many things to look after themselves so much, is that I suppose we can probably give them a little bit too much rope, potentially, and just make assumptions.
Yes.
My daughter just started her first job, and suddenly you go, oh, you're really grown up. But the mistake that you can make is just sort of assuming that they're completely capable, and they're not completely capable yet.
And Ray, I see it go in two ways. I see parents either see the height of their sons or daughters, and exactly what you say, they assume that they're now functional adults.
So they become one of us.
Yeah, and they're not. They need guidance. They need boundaries. But then I still see something else happen where some parents still won't let go. They won't allow a slow growth process to happen, allow more responsibility. And it's such a balancing act with how to enjoy these teenage years with our young people who are pulling away from us, because that's a natural part of growing up. They should be pulling away. Nobody wants a 30-year-old man-child still sitting on their couch playing Xbox. You want...
They exist.
Exactly. And we don't want that. We want our children to be independent, but it's my goodness, when? And it's going to depend on your child. But I think practically we need to recognize that there is an emotional roller coaster happening in those times. And sometimes don't get on the roller coaster. We've got to step off. It's hard to be whipped up in the emotion of what's going on with them. But don't dismiss their feelings as silly or inconsequential. Really try to be available and be kind. And then in communicating with our teens can sniff a lecture disguised as a chat a mile away. And so be careful with the way we communicate. It's easier to lecture sometimes because we do have life experience, but we've got to somehow find ways to let them mess up, but give them grace, listen more than we talk, and then, of course, keep those boundaries because they look big, but they need boundaries, not super rigid that it's suffocating. Let the boundaries change at different ages and stages. Sometimes we have to pull it back and, recheck the boundary that we let go too quickly. But boundaries are important, but then still picking the battles. Don't make everything a boundary because that's the quickest way to put the walls up with your young people.
All right, great advice there. Of course, we'd love to hear from you via the Hope Media. Absolutely jump on board and shoot us a message. This has been Raising Teens. Good to talk to you.